Okay, thank you. Hear me? Okay, so here's what this talk is going to be. Well, first of all, thank you for having us. It's a really fantastic workshop, as we all know. So, what this talk's going to be about, in a nutshell, is we're going to introduce a new, novel, we hope, logical framework with the goal of capturing some of the features of natural language, especially with respect to modals, conditionals, and quantifiers. And part of the interest for us of this framework is that it's got a natural interpretation as a form of what we call semantic expressivism. So just having said that, you'll already note that there is some interesting, clearly going to be some interesting overlap with some of the things that have been talked about already in the workshop. But there's also going to be some interesting differences with some of the other systems we see. So it's going to be one of these cases where there's a lot of overlap, we agree about lots of stuff, and then there's some interesting differences too. Okay, so that's the nutshell story. But let me make a few slightly more substantive introductory remarks. And the way I'll do this is I'll just outline some of the issues that we think this framework is interacting with. And then I'll say something about what the framework has to say about these issues before we get into all the details. Okay, so here are three big picture issues that we're hoping to speak to. The first one's an issue just from epistemology. So it's a pure epistemology issue. And the issue is something like, what's the right way in general to capture the interaction between an agent's epistemic and doxastic mental states and what they're committed to in terms of certain kinds of interesting claims, like modal claims, conditional claims, and quantified statements, and interactions between complex claims that are made up of these kinds of elements. So that's just an issue from epistemology. What sort of information does an agent need, for instance, to be committed to a conditional claim? Here's a second issue. Now, this is an issue from semantics or philosophy of language. I think it's becoming more and more popular to divide the study of meaning into different parts and different aspects of meaning, and then to ask how these aspects interact with each other. And in particular, we're interested in the interaction between compositional value, compositional semantic value, and what sometimes people call the object of assertion of an utterance. And then there's this other thing which you might call typical communicative value, which is something that you get out at the end of the day with an utterance, which probably arises from something like pricing considerations too, and so on. We're mainly interested in the interaction between compositional value and object of assertion. The compositional semantic value of an utterance is something like the object in the theory that gets composed when you're giving the compositional semantics. So it's doing that job. On the other hand, the object of assertion of an utterance is something like its literal communicative value. Maybe a different way of putting it, it's something like the content of the claim that gets communicated just on the basis of semantics. I should just say that in talking about content here, we have to be a little bit careful because, as you'll see in a second, one of the issues for us is going to be, is it right to think about the object of assertion of an utterance, or is this being a proposition or a piece of information, or is it better to sometimes think of it in other terms, such as a property of mental state or something like that. Okay, so there's a question about how these things interact. And for instance, some people have said that compositional semantic value should be identified with object of assertion, for instance. And then finally, here's another big picture issue that's received a lot of discussion in various ways. The question of semantic priority when you're doing a semantical system. What should sort of come first in the hierarchy of your discussion? Should warranted assertability / acceptability / assertability with an I, those kinds of conditions come first? Should that be the primary thing when you give a semantics? Or should truth conditions be the primary thing that you give the semantics? Okay, now out of these issues comes some slightly more specific issues that we're going to speak to too, so let me mention those. So here's a question about objects of assertion, which I kind of hinted at already. With those, should we go descriptivist or expressivist? And that's been a big debate. So to be a descriptivist about objects of assertion says something like, the object of assertion of a declarative utterance is going to be a proposition, a piece of information. And in general, that's true. If you're an expressivist, you're going to say that the right thing to say about objects of assertion is that they are properties of mental states. That's the main thing that's being communicated by a declarative utterance. So the question, who's right, descriptivists or expressivists when it comes to the object's assertion? Second of all, here's a question about compositional semantic values. Should we think of those as being in descriptivist or expressivist light? So again, we can think of them as being propositions. That's one proposal. Another proposal is that they're properties of a mental state. Again, that's kind of an expressivist proposal. Or you could go dynamic and say something like context change potential. So there's all these options on the table as to how to think about compositional semantic values. And then finally, here's another question from semantics. It's more of a technical question. What indices of evaluation do we need when we're giving a formal semantics that's capturing the phenomenon we're after? Do we need a world? Do we need an information state? Do we need both? Do we need some other stuff? So these are the sorts of questions that have been in people's mind a lot, and we're hoping it'll be clear that our system has something to say about all of these issues. So here's the idea behind the system. So it's going to be a state-based formal semantics, modals, conditionals, and basic quantifiers. And what we mean by state-based is that in this system, there's only going to be one index of evaluation, and that's going to be an information state, which we're going to think of as being a set of rules. We're going to call the system quantified assertability logic, QAS. By the way, notice that the assertability up there has an I, not an A. So you can replace that with acceptance if we like. We'd be okay with calling quantified acceptance logic. What we mean when we talk about assertability with an I is we're trying to capture a purely epistemic notion. So it's the way to think about it is something's assertable with an I for an agent just in case it's assertable if you abstract away from sort of Gricean considerations, cooperation, strategic considerations, things like that. It's capturing a purely epistemic fact about the agent. So that it's epistemically appropriate for them to assert that thing, putting aside these other kinds of considerations. So another way of putting it is, forget about assertion. It's what the agent is entitled to accept from the point of view of the information they have, putting aside what they're allowed to assert. Okay. So just so you're clear about what we're trying to capture here. Okay, so it's going to be state-based, and that's its name. Okay, so we picked that name because it's going to have a natural interpretation as giving us assertability/acceptability conditions. So notice that that's saying something about some of the issues already, right? We're saying something. One way to understand what's going on here is this is a proposal to the effect that assertability conditions are primary in semantics, and that's the place you should start. Maybe truth conditions later. That's one way to interpret what's going on. Now we think the system has two kinds of motivation that we're going to try and emphasize. First of all, it does a pretty good job in predicting some very tricky linguistic data that other theories have a hard time predicting. And in fact, we'll go through some salient rivals to show you that there's all these popular systems out there that can't make these kinds of predictions. The other motivation is a little bit harder to get to make precise, but I think there's something important going on here. We're going to try and convince you that it's a somewhat natural and conservative system in an important sense. Okay? When we try and get a little bit more precise, then just say, look, it's natural. We'll try and say in what sense. Okay, but we hope that what the system's going to do is bolster, it sort of gives you tools for bolstering sort of three positions in philosophy of language or epistemology. First of all, just the whole idea of state-based semantics. So just expanding on this whole idea of doing state-based semantics. There's really good work done on this by Feldman, Chiardelli, us, Berea. So we're just trying to push that program a little bit further. So you can just sort of think this is a technical endeavor where there's a certain way of doing semantics, and we're just sort of checking how you can do it when it comes to sort of new materials, including conditionals and quantifiers. The other thing that we're hoping, sort of position we're hoping our system will bolster is, again, this idea of some semantic primacy of assertability conditions. We want to show that we start with assertability conditions or warranted assertability conditions. We can get a lot of work done. In fact, it looks like there's some special advantages that are nice. And then finally, and this is the most important thing considering our topic, the title of the talk today, we think it's got a natural interpretation as a form of semantic expressivism. And we think this is a position in the philosophy of language that's unfairly denigrated in some ways. More or less what semantic expressivism is the idea that objects of assertion and compositional semantic values should both be treated as properties of mental states, and in fact they should be identified. Okay. All right. Say a little bit more about that in a second. But there's some people out there in the literature who are defending something like this view, like Sarah Haas, Eric Swanson, and probably the most explicit people defending it is us. Okay, there's work coming out of this soon. Okay. All right, so here's the plan. I'm going to give you a couple of technical preliminaries, set things up quickly. Then I'm going to give you the system itself, try and convince you it's natural, see what I can say about that. Then we're going to look at linguistic data, sort of the next phase of motivating the thing. And we're going to do some linguistic data that sort of suggests some natural assertability principles and show that our system delivers those principles. So it's got a very neat, direct way of explaining some tricky data. That's what Shane's going to step in, by the way, and take over. And then Shane's going to go into part 4.2, where we're going to look at some salient rivals to our system. In particular, we're going to look at what we'll call classical descriptivism, domain semantics, a la Yaltsin, and McFarlane, and update semantics. And we're just going to show that, we're just going to point out, more or less, that those systems don't deliver the same predictions that our system does with respect to assertability conditions. Okay, so to the extent that that's an advantage, our system has that advantage. And then we'll end off, we'll see how we do for time, but let's talk about some further interesting predictions that our system makes. These predictions are interesting because they speak to some other controversial issues people have been discussing, and we think that to some extent our system has some obviously nice things to say, but there's also some of the ways of spinning it where some of these things come out as objections to our system, so we want to just point that out and then offer something like additional replies, if we have time. That's the point at which I'm a little hazy about how the time. Okay, so this is the plan. All right, so let's talk about a couple of preliminaries, just so we can see what our basic assumptions are here. First of all, just a whole bunch of terminological things, because I'm going to be throwing around some terminology, and I want everyone to be clear about how we're using some of this terminology. In particular, look at the fourth point. There's semantic expressivism, and our whole deal is that we're going to be defending that, so I just want to make sure that we're all clear about what we mean by that, as opposed to other forms of expressivism. Okay. In particular, some of our rivals also count as expressivists, it's just not semantic expressivists, so let's get clear about what the difference is between us. So look at the top. We'll call this claim at the top pragmatic expressivism. That's a claim about the nature of assertion, in particular what the goal of assertion is in ordinary discourse, ordinary aspirative discourse. And it says this, assertions express properties of belief states in order, and here's the goal of doing that, to coordinate those states. The whole point of making an assertion in this picture is to communicate that you're holding certain beliefs, or at least your doxastic states with certain properties, and you're communicating that with the intention of it being the case that everyone in the conversation converges ultimately, has the same doxastic state, at least with respect to the topic of discussion. Now contrast that to what we could call pragmatic descriptivism, which is a more orthodox position, kind of arising from the wholesale and carrier tradition. That says that assertions express propositions, so pieces of information about mental states, properties of mental states, and then the idea of that is to coordinate acceptance on those states. Okay, that's how we're so notice the distinction there, right? So we're going to be committed to pragmatic expressivism. And the way we're going to see it, everyone we call an expressivist in this talk is committed to pragmatic expressivism, at least, including us. Okay. We're also going to assume that all the expressivists we talk about are committed to expressivism for epistemic vocabulary, and the epistemic vocabulary we have in mind in particular is ordinary might claims with the epistemic reading and indicative conditionals. Okay? And what we mean by expressivism here is something quite specific, so it's sort of the standard way of thinking about expressivism with respect to these things. First of all, in the case of might P expresses compatibility of the proposition P with the agent's belief state. Okay, so that's the property of a mental state that's being expressed by might P. So that's the standard way of thinking about it as an expressivist. So notice that that's saying that might be, that's not saying that might be expresses a certain proposition, it's saying that might be expresses, well, it's not expressing that you're committed to a certain proposition, what it's saying is that you're committed to compatibility of your belief state with a certain proposition. We've seen this idea before, it's virtual before. And as for if P to Q, the standard idea is that that expresses conditional belief, right? So it's not, again, it's not expressing that you're committed to a certain proposition, it's saying something like your belief state updates in a certain way, particularly when you get given the information. All right, so we're going to be committed to that too. So far, two things. We're committed to pragmatic expressivism for epistemics, not commitments that we see as differentiating us from our rival expressivists. So here's the key one, semantic expressivism. That, as I said before, is the claim that the compositional semantic values of declarative utterances are properties of information systems. So that's going to be the claim that distinguishes us from our rivals, rival expressivists like the dynamic semanticists and the update semanticists. We tend to think, one nice way to think about what those guys are up to is they are denying that you should identify objects of assertion with compositional semantic values. Then they give an interesting story about what the compositional semantic values are. They say they're context change potentials, or just sort of pairs of objects, things like that. And they give you a nice compositional semantics, and then they recover expressivism using post-semantically. By then, once you've got the semantics on the table, you can define what it is for an utterance to express a mental state and so on. So that sort of comes after the semantics, and that delivers for them pragmatic expressivism. So their whole deal is that they separate what the objects of assertion from the compositional semantic values. They treat one expressivistically and not the other. Okay. We say, no, that's not a good way to go. You should actually identify those things as a sort of classic approach. And what's more, you should treat them both expressivistically. Okay. So that's what semantic expressivism is. And then just dynamic semantics, what's that? In case you somehow you missed that. Compositional semantic values and context change potentials. Okay. All right. So we're going to be working with some formalisms, some modeling techniques that are standard, and we hope you accept this because they're standard. We point this out. I think we're all familiar with these kinds of modeling techniques. But we'll just point out explicitly that we're committing to this stuff. And of course we think these are simplifications. But we're hoping this are the kinds of simplifications that are good for the discussion we're having right now. So all the sort of complicated stuff would actually just be distracting for what we want to say. So here are convenient formalisms. We're going to model information states, sets of possible worlds. So the idea that propositions are just sets of possible worlds. We're going to model belief states as information states. Okay, so in order to be an expressivist, precise expressivist, you need to have some account of some formal account of what an agent's belief state is. So here's our model. We're just going to model those things using the content, basically. So that's information state. And then you need some account, some formal account of what a property of a mental state is, right? Because we want to say that as semantic expressivists, these sorts of things are going to operate as compositional semantic values and so on. So how do we think about properties of mental states? Those are just these sets of states. Okay. So in other words, given all those properties of states for us, there's going to be sets of models. Okay. That's going to be the technical picture. All right, and here's the language that we're going to use, and we're going to have some basic models that are going to be behind the language. And this is sort of going to be constant for both between us and our rivals that we think about it, is keep using the same language and have the same basic background models. What's going to be changing always between us and the rivals is the semantic story that relates this. Okay, but the language is just something completely standard that, as far as first-order languages with conditionals and modals go. So we're going to have some variables, we're going to have predicates, we're going to have possibility modal, we're going to have the conditional. Again, think of it as the indicative conditional. Quantifiers for all, and there exist, so just basic quantifiers. And atomic predication. So if I write little p, q, and r in the language, think of that as, it's not going to be a meta variable that ranges over possible sentences, it just ranges over atomic predications. And our first order model is just a standard thing. We're going to have 4 components, basically. A set of worlds, which is non-empty. A non-empty domain of objects, D. A valuation function that tells you at each world which objects in the domain have a certain property. Okay. And a variable assignment, which we'll always label with G. Okay. So hopefully all that structure is completely standard. All right, good. That's all the boring preliminary stuff done. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the system. So we always debate whether we should get the linguistic data first, get you all excited about that, and then get the system. We'll go the other way around. Today what we're going to try is give you the system, try and convince you it looks like the right system in some sense, and then bolster that with the linguistic data later. Okay, so, all right, so I'm going to go through this kind of slowly because some of the courses get a little complicated. So everything's going to be given relative to the background of some or other first order model that we fixed. And the way to sort of generally read what I'm going to give you, I should have said this actually since we're at the bilateral workshop. This is going to be bilateral. It's not just state-based, it's also bilateral. That's kind of important, otherwise we wouldn't be here. So, okay. All right, so it's going to be bilateral. So the system is going to mutually recursively define two relations that relate semantic objects and sentences. It's going to be kind of similar to what we've seen before. So here's a nice example. So here's the semantic entries in Quas for just atomic predications. So just notice the usual sort of thing going on with that bilateral system. We're defining this guy over here, which you can think of as the acceptance relation. So read this as information state S accepts the sentence inside, as usual. And there's the variable assignment. Okay. That's something we need to add. And then this guy over here where it's flipped, that's just rejection. So S rejects the sentence. Yes, standard stuff. And we will always read it as acceptance and rejection. By the way, I should point this out too. So we have these little S's that are bold-faced. Those stand for information states. So some are a subset of the background set of worlds that comes with M. All right, so now let's read the clause. So when does it come out as true that this information state S accepts P of X? Well, more or less just if the valuation function tells you so. So in other words, the valuation function tells you that the object named by X has the property P at every world in the information state. So that's what you'd expect. Right? And as for this guy, when does S reject P of X? Just in case it's true for every world in the information state that the object doesn't have the property at that world. So throughout the information state, the agent lacks that property. So once again, sort of thinking of rejection in a kind of, in a strong way here, right? It's something like refutation. Okay. All right, so I hope that's right for me. It's standard for bilateralists and natural. Next set of clauses is also standard and natural for the bilateralists, I think. So here's how negation works. So not phi is accepted by information state S just in case S rejects phi. Okay? And not phi is rejected by S just in case S accepts phi. Okay, so negation is just doing the usual thing. It's just flipping us between acceptance and rejection. Okay? I think we'll all accept that in this current setting. And okay, and then conjunctions are sort of the usual thing. Phi and psi is accepted by S just in case S accepts phi and S accepts psi. Maybe a little more unusual, the rejection of phi and psi is as follows. It says that for every non-empty information state contained in S, you're going to have either one of two failures, right? Either T doesn't give you phi or T doesn't give you psi. Okay, so notice that's pretty strong, but that's what we want from rejection, right? This is capturing the idea that there's some sense in which phi and psi has been refuted by S. So there's no way of refining your information so that phi and psi comes back. All right, I think everyone should be on board so far. Okay, the next one's a little unusual, maybe, although I think it comes up in all sorts of interesting places. This is what our disjunction clause is going to look like, and it does a lot of work for us. So phi or psi is accepted by S just in case S can be divided into two exhaustive substates. Right? And so here's the exhaustivity part of it. And one substate accepts phi and the other one accepts psi. So the way to think about this intuitively is an agent's committed to phi or psi by their information just in case there's two ways that their information could develop based on further inquiry. And one way is going to guarantee that phi, and the other way is going to guarantee that psi. Okay. And then the rejection of phi or psi says that for any non-empty subset of S, so in other words, any way of developing your information, you're going to get two failures. Either that development doesn't give you phi, it doesn't give you phi and it doesn't give you psi. Okay. So again, it's a strong idea of refutation. Okay, so we think this clause is for disjunction. This entry for disjunction is very natural, especially if you're an expressivist. So we get a lot of nice results using this that we think fall out of the very natural picture of disjunction in this setting. Okay, how does possibility claims work? So my phi comes out as accepted at S just in case S doesn't reject phi. Okay, so this is the idea of compatibility that we want to capture. This expresses the idea of compatibility. Your information state doesn't reject phi. So I guess that's a weak acceptance or something like that. Okay. And then what is it to reject? My phi. S rejects my phi just in case S rejects phi. Okay. So in other words, it's been established forevermore with phi. That sounds okay to us. All right, next. So this is where we start to go beyond stuff we've done before in previous work. What about the conditional? Okay, so here is, well, so let me tell you something we're going to use for both the conditionals and for quantifiers. To introduce a little bit of notation. So if I write down this over here, so we've got sentence phi with these, with those parentheses, and we've got S over there and G over there. The way to read this is, we'll call it the quasi-maximal phi state in S relative to G. Most of the time we won't say in S relative to G because it's fixed by it. It should be clear relative to context. And in particular, more precisely, what set this is going to be, it's going to be the union of all the substates of S that accept phi. Okay, so think of this as taking all the substates of phi, all the ways of developing the information in phi further, that all the information, developing the information in S further such that you end up getting phi is accepted. Right? Take all those, take their union, and that's what this guy over here is doing. Now the reason we call this the quasi-maximal phi state is because in certain sort of simple instances, this turns out to be a way of getting back the maximal phi state in S. In other words, the biggest subset of S that verifies this holds phi. Okay. And in particular, that's going to happen when phi is just a atomic predication or an indication of an atomic predication. And it's also going to be the case if you have something of the form might P, where P is an atomic predication. So often this actually does turn out to be the maximal phi state in S. It doesn't always, by the way. So for instance, if you look at not P and Q, so negations of the simple conjunction, those sometimes will have two distinct maximal phi states. So this would actually be the wrong result. We actually think that maybe one way of refining our system is to just work directly with maximal states. Not you sort of use this middle land here. But it turns out this middle land is convenient because it's precise and gives us everything we want today. So I'm just glad that it's maybe an area for. I think this guy over here is going to be important. The fact that it's maximal a lot of the time, that doesn't work for us. Okay. Anyway, so that's what this thing is. Now, how do we use this? We're going to use it over here in the clauses for the indicative. So if phi and psi gets accepted by S, just in case two things, let's forget about this for now. Let's focus on this, because this should be relatively familiar. Just in case the quasi-maximal phi state relative to S accepts psi. Okay? So in other words, intuitively, the biggest subset of S that gets you phi will, if you're updated to that, evaluated relative to that, you'd be committed to psi. Okay? So that should remind you of the suppositional literature, the suppositional way of dealing with indicatives stated by people in that expressivist tradition. Let's ignore this. What about rejection? So when are we saying that if phi and psi comes out as rejected by an information state? Well, just in case the maximal phi state relative to S, the typo, rejects psi. Okay. Now, let me say something about this part over here. So we're building a semantic presupposition into our account of conditionals. Namely, a conditional is only accepted if the information state accepts that it might be that the antecedent holds. Okay? And similarly, so the sense in which this is a semantic presupposition is that presupposition is going to hold for both acceptance and rejection. So likewise, you can only state the rejection of an indicative if the antecedent is possible relative to your information state. Why are we doing that? Well, we're basically destroying Steinert to some extent. Steinert forcefully points out, and I think a lot of people agree with him, that indicatives presuppose the liveness of the antecedent. There's something very strange about stating an indicative where it's entirely clear that the agent doesn't hold it possible, doesn't consider it live in some sense that the antecedent holds. Let me give you a quick example, which I'm sure you've heard things like this before. Suppose I say the following to you, look everybody, here I am, and then I say to you, if I'm not here, my alarm clock didn't go off this morning. Seems like I'm saying something rather strange. The best way to interpret that as a joke or something like that. Sort of an odd thing to say. The reason it's odd is because everybody in this room knows, and it's pretty certain that I'm here. So it's very strange for you to say, if I'm not here, I missed my plane. You have to interpret that. You have to think about how to interpret that in an unusual way. So you're not, one way of dealing with that is, you don't have to deal with that by treating this as a semantic presupposition. You can also deal with it as a pragmatic presupposition. So we don't want to come down hard on which is the right way to do it. But I will point out that this doesn't work for us doing it semantic instead. All right, so far so good. And then now we're almost there. It's going to give the clause for the entry for universal claims. And this is where things are a little bit more complicated and we think a little bit more interesting. In fact, I'm going to give you a rejection claim for universal claims first. And we're going to just have the usual duality between existence claims and universal claim, for better or worse. So this is actually kind of the clause for when you can accept an existence claim. So maybe that's a better way to think about it. So when does the state reject that every phi thing is a psi thing? That's the way to think about this. Here's our claim. There exists some partition of the information state such that for every cell in that partition, some or other object in the domain such that this holds. That cell is a cell that's contained in the maximal phi state, where you make sure X is referred to the D, this object over here that we don't identify. And what's more, it's a cell that's incompatible in an important sense with the maximal psi state. Okay? Again, where X is forced to refer to D. So that sounds pretty technical, right? It's a little technical. It takes a long time to find this thing so that it gets us all the results we want. So let me just spell it out in a slightly more intuitive way so you can see it's not some completely technical gerrymandering. I mean, more or less what this is saying is, so when is it that you have to definitively give up a claim to the effect that every phi thing is a psi thing? Well, here's what we say. Think about your information state. The state you need to be in is that that information state can be divided somehow into different lines of inquiry that are altogether exhaustive. And for every one of those lines of inquiry, there's going to be some or other object. Maybe it's not always the same object in every line of inquiry, but there's going to be some or other object where ultimately you're forced to say that that object is a phi thing and not a psi thing. Okay? That's more or less just what this is saying down here, in the case of these simple atomic predications. In this line of inquiry, this particular object turns out to be a phi thing and not a psi thing. And you're going to always find such a guy, no matter which of these lines of inquiry you go for, and these lines of inquiry are exhaustive. Okay, so the petition stuff is just saying, divide into these exhaustive lines of inquiry. Okay. And that to us actually sounds about right, at least for atomic predications. And let's go back then to the positive clause for information, for quantified claims, universal claims. So when should you say that your information state accepts that every phi thing is a psi thing? Well, there's a clause for every partition I of S, or every possible exhaustive set of lines of inquiry, for every cell in that partition, and every object, indeed, if that cell is contained in the maximal phi state, then that cell is contained in the maximal psi state, where again we're making sure that X refers to the object we care about. Okay. So that's sort of a complicated way, an overly complicated way it looks at first, but just saying something simple, which is, in the case of atomic predications, it more or less just ends up saying, look, take a look at all this, for any object you like, take a look at the set of worlds where that object is phi. Those worlds are also going to be psi worlds for that object. Right? That's all this is saying. And it's just, on the face of it, just a super complicated way of putting that simple point. But it turns out it matters, more complicated statements, exactly how you frame this. So that's why we're putting it kind of a complicated way. Okay, so it's something natural, but just framed in some needlessly complicated way it looks like, and it ends up doing work for us. Okay, so I say that the system is natural. I hope you agree with that. But the way to summarize it is, look, what the system is doing is it's taking natural clauses for atomic predications and generalizing them in an interesting way that's going to give us some nice results. So it's natural in the sense that it's just a generalization of what's natural for atomic clauses. Okay, and then we introduce things like must, just as the dual of might. We introduce there exists as the dual of And then there's this conjunction, disjunction that you can introduce, which is a bit like our disjunction, but it's got existential import, if you like, with respect to the disjuncts. So make sure that the disjuncts aren't empty. So this is similar to what Maria uses in some of her work. And we just like to get it up on the table. We can talk about it more later, I suppose. Okay, so now with all that on the table, we can define various important notions for an expressivist. I need to hurry up. So here's expression. So what does sentence by express relative to a model? Well, we're going to say it's this property of a mental state. So in other words, this set of information states. It's a set of all information states contained in the set of rules that verify or support or accept the sentence by. Okay. All right. We can define something called asymptotic consequence. So we can say that the size and asymptotic consequence of phi 1 through phi n is sort of natural way for every model n, state S and assignment G. If S verifies this conjunction, then it verifies psi. Okay. I think that's natural. Asymptotic equivalence is just that psi is an asymptotic consequence of phi and the other way around. All right, now I'm just going to point out two propositions that show you in another way that this is kind of a natural system that's not too weird. First of all, for every non-empty state S relative to any model, assignment G, you're never going to have contradictions as being something that you should accept. That looks good. Sort of seems like the bare minimum if you have a bilateral system, not to accidentally make it so that you can get acceptable contradiction. There's a whole bunch of other nice things you can say, blah, 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 but the end result of it is that you get this. The logic of L, when you ignore the epistemic vocabulary, so if you throw out all the claims that have any mights in them or any indicative conditional, it's just classical logic. So in this sense, it's a conservative system. We're not breaking classical logic when you just focus on stuff that's not epistemic. It does break in the big picture, but that's fine, we think, because we think that's well motivated when you introduce epistemic vocabulary. And that is it from me. So hopefully we've got some time. Yeah, here you go. Oh, yeah, let's do that. Hawke transition, everybody. Okay, can people hear me? Okay. Cool. So, yeah, some of the clauses are very complicated, and Peter gave a lot of intuitive motivation, but like you mentioned at the beginning, the other source of our motivation has just been sort of purely linguistic. Like, there's a lot of really thorny issues about how these bits of language interact, modals, conditionals, and quantifiers, and it's been very hard to make a system that can capture those. So we can capture a lot of these puzzling cases, and I'm going to sort of show you what they are, a bit about how we do that. So everyone knows this, and we've already heard about it a little bit at the workshop. So these either Wittgenstein sentences, Yeltsin sentences, they already talked about by many people here in Amsterdam, epistemic contradictions, whatever you want to call them, things like Mary is infected but might not be, or she might not be infected but is, sound really bad. And also, as we've already heard, they contrast with things like Mary is infected, but for all we know, she's not, in that the form goes away when you embed it, and the badness of the latter seems to persist when you do all kinds of embedding. So we see these conditionals, additive verbs, disjunctions is one I'll come back to. It's very hard to make something of the form, or it's very hard to find a case where the badness of P and might not P does not percolate to the whole sentence. It's almost impossible to find an embedding where that's not the case. Okay, so we think this is actually a special case of something more general. We're not the only ones, but most people don't tie this to something more general, which is a bit like modal subordination, but does not enforce generality. This is something that Thor and Hawke call inheritance. We're going to use that name, but if people have another name for this phenomenon, we'd love to hear it, because in the other paper Peter mentioned, we got a kind of annoying review where inheritance is somewhat of a technical term in Thor and Hawke, and the explanation we give for this phenomenon does not appeal to what they mean by inheritance. So if you can think of like a nice, catchy name for this phenomenon, we would appreciate it. Here's what the phenomenon is. So it was also mentioned briefly by Maria yesterday. So if I say something, Mary is at home and might be relaxing, the claim is that you can never assert something like that when you're in a situation where, say, Maria is never relaxed at home, right? Where the only time she relaxes is on the beach or something like that. So if she's at home, she's not. So the claim is that this entails too, right? That Mary is at home and she might be relaxing there.
So if you don't think it's possible for Mary to be relaxing at home, you can't assert the first thing. It's called inheritance because you can think that this possibility claim is somehow inheriting a constraint from elsewhere. It's in the form diamond Q, but when you interpret it in this kind of second conjunct here, you're not interpreting the diamond in a somewhat unrestricted way. It has inherited a constraint from elsewhere in the discourse. Okay, it's pretty easy to give us quasi-pragmatic explanation of something like this. So you might think, okay, when I assert one, Mary is at home and might be relaxing, the first thing I do is I commit myself to Mary being at home. Whatever you think that commitment means, I've deposited it to the common ground, I've expressed my belief in that. Either way, there's some common acceptance of Mary being at home, and then I go on to say that, oh, and she might be relaxing. So given that I've already had that first commitment by the time we're interpreting the second one, we're just now expressing the compatibility of a state that accepts Mary being at home with this other thing. And so it does get the inheritance that way. And a lot of people tell a story like that. And what I want to do is give you just sort of two quick reasons to think that this really is a semantic phenomenon and not really a pragmatic phenomenon. And that kind of explanation isn't really generalized to the full story here. And one is that order doesn't seem to matter. So the kind of story I just did really depends on really the linear order in which you express the acceptances or make the deposits in the common ground or whatnot. And I think if you think about the reversing the order, so Mary might be at the office, she's working overtime tonight. Claim would be you can't assert that in a case where you think Mary is still at the office because there's a holiday party. You have to think it's possible that she's at the office sort of because we're doing overtime. That's one thing, so the reverse order. So the diamond can also inherit the constraints from sort of later linguistic material. A lot of these pragmatic things depend on the linear order in which you present them. Okay. But I think even more compelling than this is that it survives embeddings in kind of weird contexts. And in particular, it survives embedding under disjunction. Okay. So I say either Mary is at the office or she's at home and might be relaxing. Okay. The claim is that this in some way entails that she either Mary's at the office or she's at home and might be relaxing there. Right? So if you think she's a weird person who has a stressful home life but great work life, so you think she's either at the office or at home, but that the only worlds in which she's relaxed are the office worlds, not any of the home worlds, you shouldn't be able to assert this thing. So the diamond is still inheriting a constraint from sort of something it's conjoined with, even when that whole conjunction is embedded in sort of a non-support context like a disjunction. So fairly strong evidence that that is a semantic effect, and again, the reverse order also works for the embedded cases. Okay, so the sort of way of codifying this is that we think that P and diamond Q in general is asymptotically equivalent to P and diamond P and Q. Anytime you have a conjunction of that form, the diamond is inheriting a constraint from the form of conjunction, and this is true in all kinds of embedding cases as well. So this gives us our explanation of the infelicity of epistemic contradictions. So if you have something like P and diamond not P, that has to entail diamond is P and not P. And contradictions are not possible. Not epistemically possible. There are Australians in the room, so. Yeah, so that's how we think epistemic contradictions get their infelicity. And a lot of other things follow from this as well. So one particularly interesting one that I sort of have been asking about, and Marie mentioned a bit, and Julie and Luca mentioned a bit. We also get that, so this is an observation that has been made a few times, and it's been most recently and most prominently made by Matt Mandelkern, is that disjoining epistemic contradictions is also really bad. So, just come up with examples about people who might win the lottery and didn't, and things like that. And if you disjoint those, it still sounds horrible. And I'll come back to why this is very hard to explain actually later. But we get that those things are also never assertable. Because the thing embeds two contradictions. A disjunction of two contradictions is also a contradiction. Okay, so I want to mention one other very weird feature of this no one else can explain, and this is something I'm curious to hear what people think about, which is that, in fact, for us, one is enough, not both. So if you have a disjunction that's relatively classical, and our disjunction is relatively classical in that when it takes epistemic-free sentences, it behaves just like classical disjunction, then the way you get a disjunction to be a contradiction is by having two contradictory disjuncts, right? For us, we can do something different, right? So if either of the disjuncts is an epistemic contradiction, the entire thing is a contradiction. Right? So whatever the other disjunct is, so something like, either it's sunny or it's raining, but might not be. That's a contradiction for us. I think it's a pretty bad thing to say. You don't have a strong argument that the badness is a semantic thing and not just like a Gricean kind of brevity sort of consideration. But I do want to highlight this because it's a very unusual feature that has to do with the way that our disjunction interacts with modals, and I don't know of any other system that makes a kind of prediction like this. And roughly, the reason is that the empty information state is special for us, right? So normally that's like a degenerate thing in dynamic semantics and most domain semantics. Like the empty information state just supports everything because there's no information there. And it doesn't support everything for us. It supports every classical formula. It doesn't support diamonds. Right? And so, so even if you have an information state that supports phi, some arbitrary phi, you can't introduce a disjunction that has existential import if it's contradictory. Well, you can't introduce them in general, but the only way that you can get something like this to work is if the zone for the right disjunct were the empty set and the one on the left were phi, but the empty set doesn't even support the epistemic contradiction, so you can never find a non-empty information state S that supports this thing. Okay. So that's a novel prediction that I think is probably good, but we'll be curious to hear more about. Okay, now to some of the quantifier cases. So we're not doing any of the really hard puzzles that Maria spends a lot of time working on in her various species, and mainly because she got them right, so we have nothing new to say there. But we will talk about some of the puzzles that she mentioned yesterday that sort of don't rely on modes of identification or anything like that, but just sort of point to ways in which, once you extend the language to have this diamond, it seems like classically valid principles cease to be valid. Okay. And so this is one that's also been pointed out by many people here in the sort of GSD tradition and Maria and whatnot. So take an inference like this. Every person in quarantine is a person who might be infected. Totally nice, like that's why they're quarantined, because they can be dangerous. We know that someone in quarantine is not infected. There are plenty of ways that we could come to know that without knowing particularly who it is. And so you might think from that, so if the quantifiers behave completely classically, the following would follow. Somebody who is not infected might be infected, right? Because these things have the following form. Every Q is a diamond I. There is some Q that's not an I. And well, if the universal is roughly subset, so that every Q is a diamond I, and then we have some Q is a not I, we should also have that some diamond I is not I, and then another symmetry, right? But you can, this thing at the end you just can't say, right? Everyone agrees that that's really implicit statement. Somebody who's not infected might be infected. Okay, so something has gone wrong. What exactly? And then, the way that we're going to diagnose it is just that things of that form that look a bit like, you might think open epistemic contradictions, epistemic contradictions with open formulas instead of sentences are also genuine contradictions. And our clause does deliver that, right? So that thing, some not I is a diamond I, is never assertable. Right? Because you'd have to have a cell of the partition, which is, so it gets a little complex. So you have to have a cell of the partition, which is always non-empty because partitions are sets of non-empty states, that has an empty intersection with the negation of contradiction, basically, and that's going to be the whole state. So it's never going to be true. You can work through the details, but that's the rough idea. This is isn't the only possible. So that's like a light generalization of the general kind of epistemic contradiction reasoning to this more complicated case of quantifiers. What's weird is that there are still like cases that seem like maybe they should not be good, but that are good, especially if you accept sort of duality of the universal and existential as we are. So here's another context from Yeltsin. Everyone that's quarantined, in some ways, like might be infected because they all tested positive, right? But it's like almost certainly true that there's a false positive, right? And that someone's not actually infected. And so one way you might report that is that not everyone who might be infected is infected. Everyone might be infected, but someone's not. We know that, and so it's not because that everyone who might be infected is in fact infected. But if you accept the duality, then you also think, well, that's kind of like someone who might be infected is not infected. And we just thought, that's really bad. So what's going on? Like, how can this be a totally normal thing to say, whereas the other one is not? Okay. And, yeah. Also, it's contingent, right? So it's not the case that it's like always true and that's why it's acceptable. So the negation of the thing I just reported, everyone who might be infected is infected, also can be said in totally normal context, right? So if we know that the test is actually in fact perfectly reliable and so that we don't think there are any false positives, then we can also just say everyone who might be infected is in fact infected. Also a contingent thing to say. Okay, and we can deliver that, right? So I'll tell you a little bit about a kind of context where you can say that not everyone who might be infected is infected. So if you think about me and Peter, that's the only objects in the domain, and the agent's information is structured in the following way. So they know basically that exactly one of us is infected, but they don't know which one of us. So that, sort of like in half their information, I'm infected and Peter's not, and in the other half, Peter's not infected, or Peter's infected but I'm not. Then you can say not everyone who might be infected is infected. Because however you go on to carve up that information, or there's a way of carving up that information, namely into the world where I'm infected and where Peter's infected, such that there's someone who might be infected but is not, right? In the one case it's Peter that's not infected, but he still might be. In one case it's me that's not infected, but I still might be. In the that's what information is. Okay. And finally, so spent a lot of time talking about disjunction. That was about quantifiers. And I will spend a little bit of time talking about conditionals, which is the other thing in the title. Most of the observations are pretty classical, so they already go back to like the Lewis-Kratzer tradition, really exploring some of the things that even motivated Kratzer's analysis of conditionals as restrictors on modals. Was about like how tightly things are linked together. So if I say something, so consider a context like this, you might just flip a coin, right? We don't know the outcome. So it's either heads or tails. That's the only possible outcome for a coin. It might be heads, it might be tails. Okay. So we know those two things. It's one or the other, it could be either. It follows from that if it's not heads, it's tails, and if it's not tails, it's heads. And it must be that way, right? So the must and the consequent, that also holds. And so we think this is just like a kind of logical principle, right? You have a couple of premises that basically say P and Q partition an information state, and that both things are possible. And then you get the relevant conditional, right? Then it's not tails, it's heads. And that thing is a valid inference in our system. Okay. My notice when I characterized it, I actually forgot to put the must in the consequent. That was actually an accident, not something I was intending to do, but it's kind of nice because people often think that the must is redundant in the consequent of a conditional. So the indicative is kind of, Peter already referred to it as an instance of epistemic vocabulary, and it sort of does say that the consequent is accepted in some sense when you update with the antecedent. And so a lot of people think that what that amounts to is that if P then it must be Q is equivalent to if P then Q, at least as far as like epistemic warrant for assertion goes, and that also comes out true for us. Okay, final one, which I think, so yeah, Maria told me we were going to explain all your choice today, and we aren't going to do that at all, but we'll say one thing about free choice, and maybe Oh, there's one more fact I forgot about. Sorry, so, yeah, I forgot to make this one. So, if I say something like, if my team wins out, they might make the playoffs, right? It seems like I consider it possible that my team will win out and win the playoffs, right? It's a bit like the inherent constraints phenomenon, right? I'm expressing the compatibility of the antecedent and consequent, and that comes out true for us as well. Okay, so here is a kind of free choice effect that we predict that not everyone can, which is, so free choices in general when like disjunction of epistemic possibility claims or a possibility of a disjunction entails a conjunction. So something like diamond P or Q entailing diamond P and diamond Q for different kind. It happens for different flavors of modality too. There's something we talked about a lot. Ways in which the epistemic flavor might be different along this dimension, which I'm happy to talk more about in Q&A as well. It also happens, it persists when you embed under conditionals as well. So if I say that Mary's not in Pisa, she might be in Lisbon or she might be in Rome. Right? That entails that if Mary isn't in Pisa, she might be in Lisbon. Also entails if she's not in Pisa, she might be in Rome. Right? So you have like a disjunction of possibility claims in the consequent, and it entails the conjunction of both conditionals. Right? So it's basically like a free choice effect for the wide scope disjunction, right? Just like wide scope disjunction, but it sort of persists under the antecedent of conditional. Okay, any questions about any of that there? All right. I will say one thing about one rival. We'll skip the objections. There are no objections. Or you'll rediscover all of them very quickly. I'll just say one thing really quick. So one rival is Kratzer. This whole recent literature that I've been has basically been trying to like refine Kratzer in various ways to make her counterways that does work. I want to say one thing about Yeltsin. So he is a poster child for being expressivist in the taxonomy that Peter introduced in the beginning. He's a pragmatic expressivist, not a semantic expressivist, because his indices are this complex object of a pair of a world and an information state, and then he gets the property of information states expressed via this notion of acceptance, which is truth at all the worlds in an information state. So there's a difference between the compositional semantic value and the object of assertion, and he can't get a lot of these principles. And the one that he in particular can't get, or one that I think is maximally illustrated, is that he doesn't get this inheritance to preserve under embeddings. Right? And the reason I want to harp on this one, so he can get that P and diamond Q entails diamond P and Q, roughly for the kind of pseudo-pragmatic reasoning I gave earlier. If the former thing is accepted, then the latter thing is as well. But then when you put it under a disjunction, because this compositional semantics is not done in terms of acceptance, you sort of shift to evaluating the disjunctions via his truth at a world information state pair. And then when you're evaluating, say, this Q and diamond R under the disjunction, you're just looking at truth at a pair. And so you can have a Q world and some R world elsewhere in the information state, even if it's not Q world, and make that disjunction true. And so this failure really comes from the fact that he's working with acceptance in this post-semantic way and not in this first-order semantic way. And I think it's like one advantage of going for this kind of what we're calling semantic expressivism, where you treat information states as the composite sets of information states as the compositional semantic value, that you get these kind of effects persisting under various disjunctions. Okay. And then we have something to say about dynamic semantics and some interesting objections about reflexivity conditionals and things like that. Yeah, and there's a lot more to do. And you'll probably tell us a lot more that we should be doing. So thanks.